So, good evening, everybody. Today, I will start my session with the most neglected but most important part of electrical engineering, that is earthing system. I can vouch that we commission an electrical system when almost 90 to 95% cases the earthing is incomplete, or in some cases even the work is not started, most surprisingly. And this is quite unfortunate that we do it. When I started my career, I still remember when I used to ask the team that earthing is still not completed, so how customer will or the system will allow to charge the system. Then I was told, no, sir, there is no problem because already the cables are terminated. So what? As the cables are terminated, so we have done the glanding. No? I said yes. So actually, through that gland, the earthing is achieved. And I said, how it is achieved? So the glands are touching the panel. So panel is kept on the ground or earth or whatever in the MCC panel room. Through that, it is achieved. And I thought possibly this is the practice. That time I did not know much about it. And it was done. Then when I grew up, I understood this is absolutely an incorrect proposition, and just it is delaying the process, and due to the negligence it is happening. And if you remember, in the last session I discussed about the fault level of the systems, which I described. In some cases it is 65 kiloamperes, in some cases it is 50 kiloampere, like that. Now the entire this fault system is not in place unless we find a path. In case there is a fault, there is a short circuit, there is a lightning, then where this fault current will go, it will affect the entire system, and it can be very fatal. So although it is little offbeat work and offbeat subject, but as far as safety and protection is concerned, it is the utmost important. And I want that everybody follows this. They don't feel that this is a second-class citizen and this is the last job we should take up. In my mind, this is the first job we should take up, and we understand the subject. Mostly, even in some places, we find surprisingly that we need to do double earthing, but ultimately we do a single earthing. Now the purpose, I will explain what is double earthing and single earthing, what is required. So the picture what we see here, it is we are saying it's a MET. MET is main earth terminal. We are I am giving a photograph. It is called LT body. It is a body earth, and value is less than 1 ohm. And the date is written here. This is a practice what we follow, because each and every year, like it is this particular measurement is done on 2011-2010, for example, then the second measurement is due on or before 2019-11-2011, because what happens, this earthing value changes. Why it change? Because there are a lot of elements which is in the background of this earthing value. If the recharge, I mean water recharge, is less in the earth, then also this value can differ. So in this particular, so this LT body means this is a main earthing, and in the right side what we see, that is an earth terminal of 40 number, and this is clean earth. Clean earth, last time I did, this is a basically the low voltage applications are done with this. This is a dedicated earth, and like BMS, UPS, where 110 to 24 volts are concerned, that is earth with the cable or a separate dedicated earth, because these two earthing are not supposed to mix with each other, or they should not touch each other because those voltage levels are different. So it may hamper even that radio frequency interferences also. So what are the consideration for earthing system? For generally for arcmates, uh, arcmate is basically nothing. It's a large type of earthing where we provide, for example, say 100 meter by 15 meter of complete arc mesh. Generally, it is done through round bars, and with the bars connected, created a mesh, and from there the arc strips are coming out. This is the relevant standard for doing the earthing is IS 30443, and earthing leads are there, and earth conductors are also there, and residual current circuit breakers are also provided, mostly in case of single phase earthing. So basically in the system, we are providing two type of earthing, that is main body earth, like if we consider that LT panels are done with the main earth, and the voltage level is 450. In case we go to the single, generally single phase and sophisticated equipments like BMS, UPS, DG sets, transformers of DC transformers, I mean traction transformers, there we do the this one, this clean earth, and it is separated with that. Here, two points I want to mention, that is, as you see here, these are called step potential and touch potential. The step potential is what? It is the step voltage between the feet of a person standing near an grounded object. It is equal to the difference in voltage given by the voltage distribution curve between 2 points at differences distance from the electrode. I will explain this in a better, I mean, in a simple example. This step potential is what? Now, mostly all of you travel by metro. When you get down from metro rail and touch the platform, probably you do not know, there is an insulation provided on the bottom of the platform where you are putting your feet. The reason is, in elevated stations, there are possibility of rainwater coming inside the platform through the shades. This is point number one. Point number two, this coach which is coming into the station with the third rail, this may have sometimes potential in the coach itself. So when you are getting down on the platform, there's a possibility our 1 foot is in the coach and 1 foot is in the platform. So there is a potential difference. To make up this, there is insulation provided on the bottom of the granite of the platform, and it is safe because the resistance which is measured there, it is as high as 30 kilo ohm. This is the example of a step potential. And touch potential is what? It is the touch voltage between the energized object and the feet of a person in contact with the object. Like the last time I was discussing that if there is, you are in a open area where there is rain happening. Now you are going into the shaded area. There you are entering from that rain area to that shade area. Again, there is a difference in voltage. So these two needs to be addressed during designing the earthing system. So as I discussed initially, that why the necessity of earthing is there, because it's a personal safety. This is most important. If any electrical fault is happening, we need to find a route through which the fault current flows and goes to the earth without hampering any system or not hampering personal safety. So it is the, we need to avoid this hazardous step potential and touch potential, or generally commonly known as shock. or even death by low impedance grounding and bonding between metallic equipment. This I will explain when we come to lightning protection system, how dangerous it is. Piping and other conductive objects so that current due to faults or lightning do not result in a hazardous voltage rise. Step potential and touch potential, I have already discussed. Equipment and building protection, a direct and low impedance path to ground and bonding between electrical services is required to achieve this. Next is electrical noise reduction. Proper grounding aids electrical noise reduction and ensures this. Again, I will explain where we deal with VFD drives, which is very important to reduce the ripple or harmonics, what we normally say. And the whole idea is to provide an impedance to avoid the shock, or what we say, this effect of step and touch potential. And the last one is a minimal effect of electrical and magnetic field coupling. Value of arc resistance is generally followed less than 3 ohm, and for rocky soil it is less than 5 ohm. Clean earth should be less than 1 ohm, but for all practical purposes, generally we follow an earthing of less than 1 ohm in both the cases. It is to be kept in mind that all apparatus, equipment, signal transmitters, etc., each and every component has to be earthed. It cannot be said that these equipment or these drive is not required to be earthed. Each and every equipment which is used in the electrical circuit, where any termination, any cable, any bus duct, anything is terminated, it requires a solid earthing. So we cannot say, okay, this is a small equipment, no earthing is needed. It is not like that. Generally, as I said, that in big infrastructure type of jobs, generally we use a huge earthment, but for a smaller kind of job, this big earthment is not required. Again, for this, there is a calculation that what will be the dimension of the particular earthment. It comes again from the fault level calculation. So in addition to that big main earth terminal, we provide plate earthing stations. This is a general follower, because for where the space constraints are there, and generally for building, hospital sector, and this type of application, plate earthing is very popular. This is a 600 by 3 mm GI plate, 6 mm GI plate, or with the same dimension copper plate. But generally nowadays we have avoid copper because of theft and pilferage cases. But the purpose is same. The one thing is there that as far as conductivity is concerned, you have to decide what will be the dimension of GI plate for a particular earth fault, and compared to that, what will be the copper plate. The earth resistance in both the cases has to be less than 1 ohm. The earth lead is connected to earth plate through copper oblique brass bolts. Please take care that it doesn't have the bolts which are rusted. I mean, not a very ordinary GI type of bolt. Like earthing, the plate earthing, another one is also available, that is pipe earthing. This is basically a porous pipe is engraved into the soil or in the earth, and charcoal and other chemicals are added to it, and then this earthing is done. This is also equally popular. It depends on the application and what is the space constraint we have. Earth leads are basically metallic strips from this plate earthing or pipe earthing, where it goes to the respective equipment. That is through that strips it is laid. This is a typical network of how the earthing looks like. As you see here, this is actually a schematic of clean earth schematic, and actually it doesn't matter whether this one. This is the main earth schematic which I was discussing. Now, what you see here is that from this particular any of this is basically I have shown a substation. Now, if you see from here, it is schematic means it's like our schematic diagram what we use in HVAC field. That is, you can say P&I process and instrument diagram like that. It is like that. And as you see that this from each emitting earth leads are going out from here, and these are basically the different equipments. And these particular, for example, these particular two strips are creating a bus sort of thing. Sometimes, and it is in for generally building application or in a, I would say this type of non-infra type of application, we provide this main earth terminal above the MCC panel, where the earth strips are coming from plate earthing or pipe earthing, and it is connected there. From there to that emitter bus, it is going to each and every equipment, and it is loop. What I was during starting, what I was saying, as you see from here, each and every equipment is arched with two earth strips. This is mandatory. Why it is mandatory? It is very simple. Due to some reason, if one earth fails, then the other should be in operation. In that case, there will be generally no situation like that when the equipment is not getting any earth. That is the whole reason we are providing two earth strips. And if we provide one earth strip, in case there is a breakage or due to any reason that particular earth bus is not working, then the equipment is at risk because it is not getting any earth into that. And as you see here from these particular main earth terminals, we have taken through this bus and earthed all the equipments. No equipment here is we can find without earthing. Similar circuit is for clean earth also. And in clean earth, only important thing is we need to know the requirement of the other system users. For example, generally this clean earth requirement is not generally don't come from exactly from our side, I mean HVAC side, but sometimes it happens that, for example, if precision unit is supplied by some other supplier, but generally as it is a part of HVAC, we may need to do that earthing for this. So in that case, we need to know what is the requirement, whether they need clean earth or main earth, and accordingly we need to do. But one thing is very important: when we are running the main bus or earth bus, then at under no circumstances these two should collide with each other. This has to be kept separately, or even there is a space constraint. Then for clean earth, you can provide a sleeve which will protect these two come in contact with the main earth. Another one thing, it is generally used in electrical engineering system, that is called TNS earthing system. TNS earthing system is basically, I will just straight go to the This TNS path system is basically, it's a application of IEC 60364. As you see, that first letter denotes the source of power from a star connected winding. T denotes that the start point of the source is solidly connected to the earth, which is usually at a location very near to the winding. This is what we are trying to say. This is T, this is NS, and this is the source. This is the source arc, and NS, this other portion, other part, and the installation equipment. I mean, which needs to be connected. This is that. The second letter denotes the consumer. The consumer equipment needs to be earth. Two basic methods can be used to identify that. These methods are denoted by the letter T and N. The letter N is subdivided into other letters S and C. So the T denotes that the consumer is solidly earthed independently of the source earthing method. This is mostly connected to the distribution system where it connects. But generally in infrastructure, this TNS system is followed. Next comes the design consideration for lightning protection system. I was just going through an article sometimes back, and probably all of us know that there are a lot of deaths in last couple of months because of that rainy season and lightning. And I think we had some 13 million lightning so far in last 4 to 6 months. So it is very important, and we need to do the proper lightning protection system installed in any of our installations, whether it is building, hospital, any type of application it is. Now, another one important thing I would like to mention that earlier there were two lightning protection system available in the industry. One was conventional type and other one was non-conventional type. What is the non-conventional type? The non-conventional type is basically a Zener diode system, and we have a single air terminal which is located on the top of the building, strategically designed, and generally this single air terminal, which looks like a trishul, but here, I mean, in a non-conventional, it doesn't look like a trishul. It does look like a, you can say, some morsha type of tip. And generally, you, depending on the selection, it used to cover 70 to 100 meter radius. Unfortunately, in 2016, if I'm not very wrong, in the NBC, National Building Code, this non-conventional LPS system is discontinued or discarded. So presently, this particular product or application is not available with us. So we need to go with the conventional system only. The conventional system is little cumbersome, time taking, and takes a lot of inputs to do it because it requires a mesh in the terrace, and from there you need to put all the down conductors in the ground, and as many as down conductors as those many of dedicated pits are required to accommodate these lightning protection currents. So what is the type of LPS design? It is external, non-isolated for curved group metal as well as brick structure building. Standard guidelines, this is IEC 62305, and source of damage, direct lightning flashes to the external structure. This we know that when lightning happens, it straight away hits the building itself. Types of damage expected to be mitigated by the proposed LPS. Physical damage to structure, injury of living beings due to step and touch voltage outside and near the building periphery. This is what we discussed. Type of losses, loss of human lives. We have learned this from newspaper in last couple of months, and the government is very worried about it. Loss of service to the public. It can do any damage. Even I think all of us follow that when there is a lightning, we generally switch off the equipments like television, refrigerator, ACs, and it is mandatory that to take out the plug also from the socket, because even the equipment is switched off, that lightning can damage the circuit. This level, lightning protection level, this is basically level 2 we have selected, that will see that added advantage of side flash and partial lighting and electromagnetic impulse, because it creates a flux, what we say EMF, it generates. So to avoid the protections which you follow, it should follow in the level 2. Lightning striking parameters, maximum current is 1500 kiloampere, minimum current is 5 kiloampere, based on 10 to 350 microsecond waveform. This is, you can imagine, it's a huge current flow, because in the panel discussion with IEC 61439 and other panel design considerations, we considered this maximum 65 ka, and in case of lightning, it is as high as 150 ka. I mean, maximum what it can generate. So you can imagine how massive it is. The class 2 base for the structure, building with non-inflammable and non-combustible environment, also taking care of LENP, partly what we discussed on the top. Now, of course, it is imperative that what discussion we are happening, it is not for a inflammable building. Inflammable building, the entire consideration is completely different. The design is also completely different. Anyway, it is not the purview of our discussion. Now, method of determining air terminal network location, protective angle, mesh, and rolling sphere. This is what I said, that this protective angle is very important, because in which direction lightning will hit, nobody knows, whatever design, whatever research we do. Protective angle available for roof mesh peripheral conductor for class 2 LPS, 75 degree on roof level and 22 degree on ground level. This is how we place the terminals or the ground conductors. Mesh size considered 10 meter by 10 meter, maximum class 2 means this, what I'm saying, this class 2, class 3, this is all available in this particular IC 62305. The radius of rolling sphere is 30 meter. Protective zone expected for a 30 meter radius, up to 30 meter vertical and horizontal. I will explain this in the next picture. Number of down conductors considered, 4 top corners of roof to ground, aluminum conductor, and you can use copper conductor also, depending on the, again, design and about the cost implication for that. Now, again, it is important that foundation grouting, what we say, that it becomes very important, that whether the particular building can allow this lightning protection to be terminated in the building itself. That is also possible if it is a, I mean, if the reinforcement of the building is too high, then we can use the reinforcement rods of the building, but it is not a good technique and it is better to avoid. Equipotential bonding conductor. This is basically GI tapes and are to be drawn and installed all round and on the outer surface of the building. Earth station grid. It depends on the lightning. But I discussed that 150 kiloampere or 100 kiloampere, what you are talking about. Now the number of down conductors has to be designed based on that. Here we have considered total 4 conventional conducting, but it is not sacrosanct. It may change based on the design. And the overall earthing resistance targeted is 10 ohms. And of course, it is very important that what is the soil resistivity for any earthing, like the previous one which we discussed, the main earth, there also soil resistivity is very important. If soil resistivity is not adequate, then any type of earthing we do, it will not yield the proper result. Natural element consideration while doing this, as I said that metallic roof, vertical columns, and also steel reinforcement rods of RCC columns. But one thing we need to ensure here, what if we want to use any building structure in lightning protection system, then we have to ensure that during lightning under any circumstances, no living object, I mean man, animal, whatever it is, never touch that particular body. If by mistake we touches it, then there is a night, there may be a fatal injury or it may be death also. So if even we want to use any existing structure of the building, we need to protect it in the sense either some camouflaging or some sleeves which needs to protect that particular live part so that by mistake if anybody touches it, he is safe. Protection against step and touch potential to be adopted. This is we discussed, but this is again, as I said, that if you we see that B expose down conductors to be insulated for 100 kV 10/350 microsecond impulse. That means even if we it is not recommended, but due to some compulsion, if we need to do it, then we need to protect it either through a camouflage or through a sleeve provided. This is how the lightning protection system looks like. As you see here, number one is the air termination rod, horizontal air termination contactor. So basically, this is the entire network, and as I said, this is the mesh which is created from the rooftop, and we have to select whether it is a 25 by 3 mm mesh or 50 by 6 mm mesh, in a sense earthing straight. And as you see, these the verticals are the down conductors, and these down conductors are arched, as we say here, like these vertical rods. These are the ultimately it is terminated in the arc. And as you see here, when the lightning happens, it first hits this, and through this mesh and entire network, it is ultimately going to the ground and it is diminished. As I discussed that this is a pictorial representation of if we use the building structure as an earthing, then what you see here is a dotted line, and again that arch terminal, I mean air terminal is here in the top, and the dotted lines what is shown here, it is basically that earthing, this particular reinforcement of the building is being used. So these also can be used, but again, we have to be doubly sure that this particular part of the building which we are using, this is protected, and during lightning, by mistake, nobody touches these portions. So the next is a very common subject. I think all of us know, but still I wanted that we refresh our memory. This is what we say. It's a ingress protection. What is this ingress protection means here? It is, we always see it is 2-digit. So that's why it is written XX. First X stands for solids and the second X stands for water. So if I say it is 1-1, that means that particular panel or DB or particular element is protected against 50 mm solid and vertically falling water drops. Now, if I say 54, so dust protected, limited ingress of dust permitted 2 to 8 hours, and 4 stands for splashing water at any angle. Now, why it is so important actually in our selection of any electrical equipment? Because of its application. When we decide that a particular panel or a particular distribution board or a particular socket, where we'll install, when we decide where we'll install, then we need to ensure the protection of that particular equipment. If I decide that I will install a panel in an open space, and if we select a IP42 protected panel, then what will happen? Let us even not consider the solid object. I am assuming even I am installing outside, then the solid object will not come into play. But what about rain? Because it is giving a protection, hardly vertically falling water drops, enclosure tilted up to 15 degree. That means the rain is happening up to 15 degree. But as you see here, that this angle at 15 degree angle, the rain is splashing over this panel. So it will not protect. It will burn, but it will, the moisture will go in and it will not perform. So it is why it is so important that when we select any component, we need to ensure that the correct protection is selected. Here is another one important thing I want to mention. For example, I have selected a panel of say IP54. Now, in IP54, what type of dust I am protecting? It is dust protected, limited ingress of dust permitted, 2 to 8 hours. It is done. 4 means splashing water at any angle. Now, in a IP54 protected panel, there are a lot of panel manufacturers. They will offer you IP54, and generally what we ask that how we will ensure that this is IP54 protected panel. Then you will find that when they are offering you a certificate, proper laboratory certified certificate like CPRI, then National Test, whatever competent laboratory is there, when they are producing a certificate, you will find that the certificate is showing a full panel with equipments installed inside. But when it comes in a when you will submit the drawing, you will find that this particular panel is having some fans or some ventilation arrangement. But when the panel is certified from the competent authority, that time this ventilation arrangement was not there. So the panel is IP54 certified, but with the, after that, when you are putting a fan or putting a louvers, you are putting a net or whatever protection is there, but it doesn't suffice the purpose because this, it is not after putting the fans or net or opening or louvers, that IP5, that is 2 to 8 hours dust protection, limited ingress of dust permitted, is not adhered to. So when this particular condition, we are ordering a panel, or that panel vendor is giving the type test or that tested certificate, we have to ensure that whatever testing is done and whatever panel we are getting, it is exactly matching, and with respect to that, if there is any cutout or any addition is made, it will not conform to that condition of that certification. This is point number one. Point number two, another thing we want to ensure here, that in outdoor condition, possibly we are taking a 67 IP67 socket or switch or something like that. Now, this particular switch or box is 67 certified. But when we make a hole and put a gland, that time that particular characteristic of 67 is jeopardized. So while doing the installation, the installer has to ensure that when these stringent IP protections are considered during design, ordering, and material, after installation, that criteria also has to be maintained. 90% cases, what happens that in a 67 equipment, after doing these particular switches, doing the termination and other things, there is a hole in the gland area. So 99% from that holes, this water will ingress. So the 7, which means that 1 meter temporary immersion in water is not fulfilled, is not adhered to. Even I'm sure that a lot of you have used bore oil. You see in the bore oil, what happens that with the bore oil pump, we'll get a cable. Now it depends whether you will order with a 15-meter cable or 30-meter cable, depending on the requirement of your site. If it is a 30-meter deep bore, then you need 30-meter length cable. Because the reason is very simple, that if we want to do anything, I mean, we want to terminate the bore oil cable, then it will not be waterproof or water sealed. Whatever we do from outside, M-seal, gaskets and other things, it is not going to give a foolproof solution. So it is always, when a bore oil pump is ordered, it comes with a cable of a requirement like 15, 30, 40, whatever it is. And if you see that it's a round cable, it's a square cable, and we need a round, and generally our cables are round cables. So you need a junction box to terminate, and please take care, this junction box is, again, if it is installed outside, we need a proper 67 protection. So this is a continuation of the same thing, and these are the different protection and different type of application which is involved here. Now this is a rating sample. This is what we explained earlier. So IP67 is basically protection against contact with objects greater than 1 mm in diameter, such as a wire or a small tool. This is what we know. Complete protection against dust over extended time. And 7 means protected in a short period of immersion. But one thing why I brought this particular subject into my discussion, this is a very important aspect of electrical industry. And please ensure that whenever we order or we install it, we follow the purpose, very purpose of this particular ingress protection. Next is our most important aspect of HVAC industry. We use, this is the heart of us, that we use a lot of starter in our feeders, because we need a lot of starters to operate, and different type of starters we use. And the most, this is the starter which I like most, is the most simple and most convenient for using and less costly, less maintenance. But as we know, this is a basic starter. But as we know that there is a restriction of using this. Generally, we follow this direct online starting in up to 7.5 HP. But this is again a requirement based. Like if we have our own substation or own captive power plant, then we can use up to 60 HP, 100 HP also direct online starter. Similarly, for example, what we did in this Shalboni new node press project, there was a centrifugal machine, if I'm not mistaken, around 650 to 700 ton centrifugal, where we use the HT 6.6 kV motor, and there we didn't use any starter. We used the circuit breaker for a start. And the main reason is, in electrical industry, whenever you use any type of motor, the problem is always with handling high current, not high voltage. So when we select a switch gear and the protection system, always we try to avoid using high current, because whenever you are using a high current, then all sort of problem starts. As I said, that when I'm using a say 600 HP motor, my current is 750 ampere. But at the same time, when I'm using the same 600 HP, I mean 415, it is 750 ampere. But at the same time, when I'm using that 600 HP motor at 6.6 kV voltage, my current is 40 ampere. So it is very easy to handle because my contact rating is less, when my switch gear is less. The only thing is the circuit breaker which I'm using, that is of higher. So this is how this direct online starter control circuit looks like. It is very simple. And this is, again, I would like to say that, as you see here, this thermal oval, another important thing is when I'm starting any motor with direct online starter, in case of induction motor, it is 6 times of our full load current. That is, I starting is 6 times of our I full load. That means if my full load ampere is 100 ampere, then my starting current will be 600 ampere. This is point number one. Point number two, the second question is how long this starting current will be effective in my switch gear. The answer is, if it is a high torque, then it will take more time. If there's a low torque, it will take a less time. Now the consideration is, this particular timing is based on the time required the induction motor to reach its synchronous speed. Synchronous speed is what? If I am running a 4-pole motor, it is 1500 RPM. So from zero, from no running to 1500 RPM, if it is taking say 50 milliseconds, 75 milliseconds, then that is the time this starting current will sustain. If it is a 2-pole motor, it's a 3000 RPM. This is a synchronous 3000 RPM, but actual with the slip frequency, it will run say around 2950, like that. So if it is taking 1 second to reach to the synchronous, then 1 second, that 6 times will sustain. But again, it will be a damp curve. In the say between middle of the curve, when the full thrust is required, the starting curve will go maximum, then gradually it will dampen down to the full load. After getting a start, it will come to the minimum load. Minimum load, I'm saying, for a centrifugal chiller, it is minimum is say around 40% of the total load at no load, without vanes opening. Similarly for screw, without slide valves and all. So this is how this direct online starter control circuit looks like. And this is also important. This, as you see, the thermal overload delay, always keep in mind that all the protective circuits are always kept in series. It is never in a parallel circuit. If I see here, it is not like this. And As you see, it's very simple. Stop push button is a close contact. Thermal overload delay is made because motor is not started. I am pushing the start button here. It is making contact between 3 and 4. This contact is picked up and this auxiliary contact is held by this. So the motor is continuously running. And if I want to stop the motor, I put a stop button here. If I put a stop button here, the current flow is disrupted. So the contactor is de-energized, the motor stops. In case motor is taking high current, the thermal overload delay, again, remember this thermal overload setting is very important. Generally, we set 1.2 times of the full load current. You can set at 1.1 also, depending on the application. And if this thermal overload delay is operated, that means motor is getting overloaded, then this opens up the same theory. This contact is de-energized and the motor stops. Now here one small thing, this is this thermal overload delay. Nowadays it comes with single phase protection also, but this is, of course, it differs from the manufacturer, but one thing is important. Generally the manufacturers claim, for example, if you're using say a range of 6 to 12 ampere overload delay. Now the more you go towards the end of the selection, that is 12, then your single phase protection capacity gets reduced. That means if you try to select near to 6 to 7, then single phase protection is predominant compared to its thermal overload condition. So it is better while doing this selection that you ensure with the supplier that this happens with this proper selection. As I said that this dual starter is my favorite starter, and it's always very simple and economic, easy to understand and troubleshoot. And there's a 3-lead connection that is also important. If you don't have this opportunity, I mean that in case of start delta, when you need a 6-lead, and of course it's have a lot of disadvantage. As I said that if it's a limited application, we have only 7.5 HP up to in normal case, and of course if it is 6 times of the full load current, there will be a sudden dip in or significant dip in voltage. That's why it is suitable for small motors. Dual starter reduces the lifespan of the machine. This is, of course, there is a continuous surge in the total system itself. So mechanically tough. As I said that if it is a huge motor, then the torque generates is very difficult to, if it's a very big centrifugal fan, then also it is very difficult to start it. Next is start delta starter. Start delta starter, where we apply a reduced voltage starting. As I say that initiate we apply 1/3 of the voltage to start the motor, and naturally as it's a reduced voltage start, so in case of motors where it is bigger, I mean more than 7.5 HP conventionally, there we use this starter because it doesn't get a dip. What we discussed about the dual starter, it avoids that. And but in case where we have a very high torque application, there with the reduced voltage, it takes a lot of time to apply that much of torque, because when we are giving a reduced voltage, then the torque generated on the system is again that much less. Type of start delta starter, nowadays only we use fully automatic start delta starter. So I will consider only that. Now, another important thing here is start delta starter is a 6-lead motor starter. That means if you want to do a start delta, use a start delta starter, then the motor terminal has to be 6. Now, another thing is here, due to some reason, you have got a 6-lead motor, but you want to operate it at dual application. Then what you need to do, here I have what I've shown UVW and U1 V1 W1 and U2 V2 W2. So you can short this and have a 3-phase starting, dual starting. So how it works basically, start delta starter, this is a control circuit. So in case when we start the motor, it starts, and this start circuit and main circuit, it's getting energized. As you see, this is a keep it in mind, this is a single phase control circuit is shown. It is not a power circuit shown, but as we know, as it picks up the control circuit, so with this, the 3-phase contactor is getting energized. So when we give the start command to the motor, this star and S and P, these two contactors are picked up. The motor starts, and this is the time delay timer. What is written here, TDR, it's a time delay timer, and it depends on the basically it depends on the experience of the electrician or engineer who is associated, that what time delay you will see set for this timer. Now, what my suggestion is, we need to watch in the sense how long this takes from standstill condition to synchronous speed reaches. The star and main contactor may keep that much of time. For example, I am using a 100 HP motor with a start delta starter. Now, when I start the motor, then it takes, for example, around 90 seconds to reach to the synchronous speed. So I will set the timer at 90 seconds. That means during 90 seconds, that star and power contactor will be on, and when it reaches the synchronous speed, that timer will allow the delta and power contactor to run. The reason is, if it doesn't reach to the synchronous speed in the transition, when it has not reached the synchronous speed, so you are in the inrush in the sense, it has not reached to the synchronous speed, and still the current is going high. Now suddenly, if it changes the situation, that is, it converts means basically there is a momentary gap between star getting deactivated, delta getting connected. You will not feel it, but there is a gap. So there is a sudden jerk in the entire electrical system. So just try to keep in mind, generally it works, but sometimes it may not work. It is basically from the experience I'm saying. So this is what just I expressed it. And one important thing I will definitely mention here. So what we discussed in the control slide, it is again basically this one. As we say that this is the delta state of the motor, and during starting, it is a start state of the motor. This is what I said, that between switching from start to delta, the circuit becomes open and motor neither remain in start nor in delta state. This state is called an open transition state. So my suggestion is that generally you try to avoid this open state before the motor reaches to the synchronous speed. This is what we just discussed about the control circuit. As I said, the control circuit is basically, it is a control. I mean, how the contactors, I mean, as we see here, that this is a power circuit. The earlier what we saw, that was the control circuit. The difference is that contactor, when that star contactor is picking up, it is the reflection of this three-phase contactor getting energized. So the power flows like that. So this is what it is when we started. As I say, this overload here also it is in series. And I will definitely say one important thing. When you are doing an overload relay setting, please keep it in mind. It is a phase current setting, not a line current setting. We know what is the relation between line current and phase current. It is 1 by root 3, that is 1.732. If the line current is 100, my phase current is 100 by 1.732, and I will set the overload in phase current because as we saw, it's a 6-terminal motor. So the line current is not going there. It is a phase current, it is going there. So when this, in the initial stage, when I switch it on, the star contactor, I mean KM1 and KM3 gets energized. The motor starts rotating at a reduced speed. Then after a predetermined time delay, it starts, opens, delta closes. Main contactor was earlier switched on, it remains switched on, and the motor runs. One important thing also here in this, that if that phase sequence, what is shown here, U1, U2, V1, V2, W1, W2, if it doesn't match, then it will not start properly. You may face a single phasing situation. But I mean here that U1 has to be connected with U2. If U1 is getting connected with V2, then this motor will not operate properly. I mean, it will not operate at all. We have come to know that what are the components of a start delta starter. The advantage of start delta starters are popular due to their low price, and of course, this there's a less limitation of number of start, and it is very popular for the starting current is reduced to approximately 1/3 of rated motor current, and produce high torque per ampere of line current. This is what the ultimate, the starting current is also reduced. There are a lot of disadvantages also. Start delta starter can only useful of 2 motors, where the 6 motor terminals can be accessed. Of course, it depends on ordering again. The supply voltage must be the same as the rated motor voltage for delta connection. That is also generally during ordering we take care. During starting, as I said, that it will take more time because the starting torque is also reduced to its voltage, because voltage and RPM is directly proportional. This is one, I will not discuss much on this. This is a soft starter because in my mind, and I mean, this is, although a lot of industry professionals and others are talking about this soft starter, but in HVAC industry, the application of soft starter is still limited, I believe. There are a lot of reasons also behind it. Now, the basic what I will say here, how the soft starter operates, it's again a reduced voltage start. And as far as my consideration is concerned, I still feel it's a dual start, but In the dual, you apply full voltage on the motor. Here you have a option, or rather that is the option. You can reduce that voltage when it is getting started. So reduce voltage start with a timing which is close to dual starter. And in soft starter, there are a lot of, there are options that you can chop the voltage. Chop means if it is 415, you can program it to 200 volt. So initially it will be applied that, then gradually as it starts, it will go to the 415. You can program the starting current also, but considering the pricing and application, this is not that lucrative that VFD is. So I'm not going to discuss this much, because this working principle and other things mostly are equal with VFD. So I'll go straight to VFD. Actually, this VFD we are using day in, day out nowadays in particular HVAC industry. Why I brought this particular VFD into discussion? Because I wanted to explain, possibly all of you know still, that what is the principle VFD follows. As you see here, if you see the top curve, this is the sine curve, which we all know. This is the sinusoidal curve. What we say, 50 cycles per second. This is a sine curve, 50 hertz or 50 cycles per second. This is a sine curve, and it follows this. That means 50 cycle per second. Then, and that is the RPM. This is constant to the RPM of the motor. Now, in reality, what happens? When you are talking about reducing the speed or control the speed of the motor, that means if the motor is 1500 RPM, I want to operate this 1500 RPM motor to 1000 RPM, for example, even maybe less than 1000 RPM, like that. Now, in AC or alternating current circuit, this speed control is not possible. So what we need to do is, first we need to convert it to DC, these sinusoidal waves. Now, as you see from here, the width of this particular sinusoidal curve is fixed. This is what I said. Let us take from here to here. Let us consider this is 50 cycles. Now, if this 50 cycles is not reduced, then we cannot reduce the speed of the motor. And this 50 cycle in AC format is not possible to apply for reduction of speed. So what we do here, we convert this sinusoidal curve to a DC curve, or DC, or direct current. And after converting this into DC, as you see here, then the width of the curve, the width of this particular sinusoidal curve for 50 is reduced. As you see here, that from this sinusoidal curve, after when it is converted, at that particular time, it is giving a pulse. This vertical pulse. It is equivalent to that curve converted to DC. And after conversion of DC, this width of this 50 is reduced to, can be reduced. So at any point of time, when we say the motor is running at 1000 RPM, that means we have converted it to DC, and the width of this 50 is reduced proportional to that, and that is again applied with that. Now, again, it's an AC motor. The DC cannot be applied to AC for running purpose. So after this, frequency is varied, converting to DC. Then, as we say here, the above figure shows how the voltage and frequency are varied by a variable frequency drive. As an example, AC 400 for 80, it is 50 hertz applied to the VFD, which varies the signal voltage and frequency to have control of the speed. This is after this conversion. I mean, this is the waveforms after the conversion. And with this waveform, this width is reduced and speed is controlled. And after this is done, again through a component called IGBT, which is most commonly used thyristor, inverse gate bipolar transistor. It is again converting this reduced frequency or this DC, reduced DC to AC. And after reduction, it is, if it is 40 cycle per second, for example, then these 40 cycles when applied to that, ultimately that as the frequency is less now, the motor RPM is also less. And with this less motor RPM, this particular motor is running at a reduced speed. Now, this is how a VFD is connected. This is all we know. And VFD is generally used for most accurate and precise control purposes. And we all know the benefit, like limit starting current, it's smooth operation, high power factor. As we say that in case of VFD, the power factor correction is not required. Easy installations. Nowadays, the pre-programmed factory-wired VFDs are also available. Now here, as I said last time, it converts to AC, converts to DC, and then again it is converts to AC. It's a high catch here. That's why I brought this specification and wanted to discuss this. As you see here, that this one, if you read IEEE 519 1992 recommendation is used for basis of calculation of total harmonic distortion at the point of common coupling, PCC, that is that power control center. Now, what is this actually, this IEEE 519? IEEE 519 talks about the harmonics of the particular VFD or the particular system. You imagine a situation when we are using so many VFDs nowadays, like in the pump nowadays, even that secondary pumping system concept is also gradually winning out. We are converting it to a primary variable system, so it's a single pumping system. Then after that, we are using a variable compressor, centrifugal or screw. Next, we are going to HU. They are also using a variable VFD. Now, if we go to a smaller installation, they are using VRF machines. So, in a system, there are so many VFDs we are using, and when we are using, this is what just we in the last slide I was trying to mention. When it actually operates, when it converts AC to DC, the conversion is not 100%. Please keep it in mind. It is not possible also, because with a system with so many other applications like thyristor, and basically these are transistors like that. Whatever thyristors, high capacity, high quality thyristors even we add, but it is not possible to convert AC completely to DC. That means there are elements. What are those elements? That is called ripples, or that is called harmonics. If you see the earlier, this one, in the first, as you see that sine wave, But when it's getting converted, it is not fully converted. There are waves, and ideally it should be like this, but theoretically, but it doesn't happen like that. So what is creates, it creates ripples in that. What is ripples or harmonics? Harmonics are nothing which are the impurities, like what we use in our HVAC system. In water, we say, array, this is scale, this is impurities, this is hampering the heat exchanger performance. So this total harmonic distortion in IEEE 519 recommendations have been given that you have to provide filters to reduce the harmonics. Why I have brought this in today's discussion? Because unknowingly we don't ask this question at all to our VFD manufacturer, that the VFD which they're offering to us, it is creating how many distortion in the system. Now, you may ask, how does it matter? Of course, it matters, because when you are working with an impurity in the system, you do not know what role it will play in your other equipments. We all know three-phase system is a balanced system, number one. And number two, nowadays, the one word probably all of us know, that is electromagnetic interference or radio frequency interference, like that. Even with these particular ripples available or harmonics available in the system, your other fixed speed equipments may face problem. For example, if you are using your other VFDs, now when these particular harmonics are created, it is not restricted to only one drive. It creates a cascading effect to all the drives involved. So these VFD with a harmonic distortion may create other VFD also in a problem and in the entire system. And importantly, there are, I mean, I'm sure all of you are doing a lot of jobs in airports, space, like ISRO, DRDO like places. There it is very crucial, because it may hamper the air traffic operation. It may hamper the space launching, and very important things. So, and you will be surprised if not known, in normal VFD without harmonic precaution, it creates 38 to 39% distortions or ripples in the system. So if you don't need this elimination, it is fine. But it is of course your prerogative to ask from the VFD manufacturer what product they are offering, what is the distortion they are offering to you. There is an analysis how it is calculated and how it is done. There is a harmonic analysis report, how it looks like. Here is a study that I am having a system where my transformer size is 2500 kVA, that is 2.5 MVA, and it's a 415 volt low volt system, I mean a medium voltage system. Transformer impedance generator substation is 6.25%. This in my last discussion I discussed about this transformer impedance is very important. What is the cable length? 30 meter. Cross section is this. Cable material is this. These are basically the main MCC panel or transformer associated the substation data. Now here you see that how it is achieved. When we talk about total harmonic distortion, it means the total harmonic distortion is for current as well as voltage. So there is, while doing these, we came to know that with a there is a possibility in the sense, if I take some fixed speed into that load, main load of that transformer, 2500 kVA, what we said, that say I have 10 equipments, 10 motors, 5 is fixed speed, 5 is variable. So I take the advantage of fixed speed because there is no harmonic distortion and all. So I add this. So in that case, my current harmonic is achieved, but voltage harmonic is not achieved. So that's why this total harmonic distortion word comes in. And as you see here that, and this is also equally important in which load condition you are doing this analysis. If we know, again, if any system always operates perfectly or very close to its design condition when it operates at the full load condition. When it comes to partial load, all the problems start. Mostly it applies to all the equipments. For example, if you're operating a motor at its full load condition, 100% condition, it gives you a power factor of almost 0.9 to 0.92. Fantastic. As you come to 3/4, it goes below to 0.8. If you do half, it is 0.7 and all. So this is what how this looks like, that shaft power, I mean, that IKW is 250, another one where the IKW is 315, and load is at 30%. And as you see that this total harmonic distortion is at 30%, is 5.7%, and this is for the current, and with the voltage it is 0.6. Now you see even what is the difference between current and voltage. That's why again I'm saying the total harmonic distortion has to be calculated. Now in case of 50% load condition, that current harmonic is high, always high compared to voltage. And this is also in it, I mean, this is 70% load, and this is in a different load condition, it is differently given. Why I brought this again, I'm saying that this is important in case when we are getting a equipment, I mean VFD, each and every VFD is having a harmonic, no doubt about it, because of its working principle, it is having it. It is not the bad product or the supplier is trying to fool us. It is not like that. It is because of its working principle, its working philosophy. It has to create harmonics. It cannot prevent it. So the only thing is it needs to be addressed. When it depends on the application, in which application you are using. So accordingly, it's a, I thought that it's a subject which we need to know, and it has to be brought into everybody's notice, because at a later date, if you require, it is available. So we need to tell the VFD supplier, I need a VFD which will not having a harmonic distortion of more than 5%. So what will be the features which are required to be added here? So accordingly, the cost is also will be there. So before I close, I just wanted to say another one thing. This is also important. You don't need to get carried away for again this. This is also in the bottom one. If you see that it is written, the VFD shall have a dual 5% impedance DC link reactor harmonic filters of the positive and negative rails of the DC bus. This is again a misleading statement. Misleading statement in the sense, this DC link reactor is not a filter. Please keep it in mind. This is like what we say, this is an resistance added to the system, which basically improves the power factor of the system. It is not a filter that way, but it is termed as DC link reactor. Because of that terminology, it shows as it's a harmonic filter. So this is a little bit of confusing statement. So if somebody says that no, the filter is already inbuilt and this is how it is, because this DC link reactor is a part of VFD. If we ask, still it is available. If we don't ask, still it is available. But total harmonic distortion reduction filters are not available in the VFD unless it is specifically asked for. So here I close. Thank you very much. I think time also is there.
Yeah, thank you so much, sir. A lot of things we have shared today. So I think we can take some questions. So if anyone is having any question, please put it in the chat box, or you may unmute yourself and ask as well.
Yes, this is Manish Tiwari this side.
Ah,
Thank you very much, Shubhroda, for this excellent presentation. I have a couple of questions. The first one is, what is the difference between mounting the VFD directly on the motor or when it is panel mounted? How does it affect the performance?
No, I don't think it is really going to affect the performance, because if you have a space in the motor, like generally VRF, it is mounted in the same cabinet, I believe.
Right. Now,
So
nowadays, many manufacturers put it across as an added feature that their VFD is directly mounted on the motor. I give you an example in case of Armstrong pumps. They put it as an added feature that the VFD is mounted directly on the motor, and that gives a better efficiency to the whole installation. So I just wanted your clarification whether this is actually true or not, or do we have any other advantages of having it directly mounted?
no, not really. There will be one advantage, of course. It's a compact one, in the sense you don't need to do install the VFD little far away from the motor. And when you install, the problem is the cabling is a problem. Then you need to pull a cable, terminate there. From there, outgoing cable has to come and has to terminate to the motor. When it's a part of the pump package itself, then only incoming cable will do, and you terminate. I mean, if it is part of that pump package, then termination will come from the factory. So only you need to do the incoming cable termination. And performance wise, there will be no issue for that. Only the cable lost little bit of that, but for say 15-20 meters, there is no substantial cable loss. Technically, there is nothing we can say. See, in fact, this especially VFD installed in compressors, years after years we are doing it. No? So
Yes.
I don't think it is going to help.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Thank you. The second question which I had was, how do we measure harmonic distortions on the field?
No, yes, that is also possible. And one thing I forgot to mention, the slides which I showed you, it is basically a simulation. And this is a real-time simulation, and it is done by Danfoss. Let me admit straight away. So these are the proven data. It is not that it is something else, or some calculation based on that it is done. It is done based on a proper simulation, and the basic input, what I discussed about transformer and other things. With that, this simulation is calculated and achieved. And to answer Monish's question, it is possible to measure the distortion at site. They have that equipment. I mean, the full setup is available with them.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much.
yeah, thank you, sir. So any other questions, please feel free to ask. Also, Shubhra sir, I wanted to know one thing, if the slides can be shared with the participants.
Yeah, it can be done.
Okay, please send it across to us. Then
Yeah.
we can share with all our members.
Sure.
Yeah. So whoever is a member and has joined in this webinar can get access to that material, and also the certificates will be shared. Any other questions, please unmute yourself and ask. We have few more minutes to spare for the questions. If there is none, then we can move forward.
This is Jabajit here. I have a small question for you.
Yes, yes.
Both as usual, I was there in the first presentation also, in the second one also. It was good, high quality. It covered the basics entirely. Just a couple of observations. One is, I think the type of coordination, I think we did not cover, and types of cable sizing and selection, that was also not covered. Am I mistaken, or I have missed something?
Yeah, I could not follow you completely. What I understood that that in my first one, type 2 coordination was not there. To answer that, type 2 coordination presently nobody is following. For that, I discussed that we are. I mean, generally everybody is following the discrimination, because type 2 coordination, it doesn't talk much about that switchgear portion. I mean, ACB. And when we are using a starter device, then in earlier days we used to discuss about overload relay and all, but now mostly this overload relays mechanism has been replaced by MCCBs and all. We have overloads, but at the same time MCCB setting has also become equally important. So in the last one, I discussed detail about discrimination because of that. Now, of course, the cable one I have not covered because of scarcity of time. So another 2-3 subjects are still left out. So maybe next time.
Yeah, maybe we'll have a fourth one from you sometime soon.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you. That will help.
Yeah, we can definitely plan for another session with Bose sir. These are really informative and really helpful sessions for all of us, both for the students and for the professional members. So with this, I don't think any other questions are there. If any is there, we can you can still unmute yourself and ask. Otherwise, we'll move ahead with the closing of the session. Okay. Now I request our President of ISRE Kolkata chapter, Mr. Manish Tiwari, to kindly give the vote of thanks, the formal vote of thanks, and then we can close the session. Manish sir, so what are you?
Yeah. Thank you, Shubham. Thank you very much. I, on behalf of the ISRE Kolkata chapter, would like to thank Mr. Shobhranath Bose for both the sessions, the last one, the last week, and this is the second part of this session on basis of electrical engineering for HVAC engineers. And to be very honest, this is a presentation by an experienced practical HVAC engineer. Shobhranath Da is a very old hand at HVAC installations, from design to commissioning, and now with his specialization in metro projects for the last I think 5 years. This is what we are all getting to know, that is the electrical aspects of HVAC. We are to understand that in India, the most important aspect which we all forget are the safety aspects, which was very nicely covered today with the earthing and lightning arresters, and which the emphasis cannot be overemphasized. In India, we tend to take it as the last part of the project, as Shubhroda had already mentioned. So coming from there, and we moved on to starters and soft starters and VFDs, which are today the cutting edge of the technology which we are using in our HVAC field. Thank you, Shobhranath Da. As always, a pleasure to host you. I would like to thank the programs team of the Kolkata ISRE chapter, led by Mr. Amitabh Datta. And of course, once again, thanks to Mr. Shubham Banik for hosting this evening. And I'm sure that each one of us has come out better by today's evening session. Thank you very much, everyone, for being part of this show.
Thank you, Manish. Thanks a lot.
Thank you,
Welcome,
sir, for the opportunity of hosting. And with this, I think we can formally close the session.
Yes, please. We should close
So,
now.
yeah. Siddharth,
Good night, everyone. See
Good night,
you
sir.
next time.